Okay, so EKKO and FIZZ at 50% win rate is different from NAAFIRI 50% win rate. How? So all three of those champions, I would argue, should win more games than 50%. NAAFIRI, because she's very simple to play and straightforward, and EKKO and FIZZ for actually a very different reason, and that is EKKO and FIZZ. FIZZ is a very fair laner, specifically. And EKKO, in the grand scheme of things, despite the fact that he has all those outplay potential, is actually very fair as an assassin. I don't mean EKKO is perfectly balanced or anything like that, but everything EKKO does, you can just say, what if you didn't do that to me? Until he gets very, very late game and can start one-shotting you with his E. EKKO does reach a point where he can basically just one-shot you with his E, but like EKKO's W, EKKO's Q, EKKO's passive, EKKO's ult, in the grand scheme of assassin gameplay patterns, tend to be more on his opponents than they are on him to some degree. And so complexity, when we talk about like how complex characters are to play, is yes, some characters have a lot of skill expression, but some characters also just have a lot their opponents can do about them. This is something I generally believe with Katarina, as another example, is Katarina a very skill expressive character? Yes. But Katarina also just gets shut down in lane by the majority of champions, right? Like, Katarina, despite being a skill expressive character, has a lot of situations where she just can't succeed in a way that like a character like, say, Zed could. So it's a complex space, especially in regards to assassins. On one hand, EKKO and FIZZ are hard to play. On the other hand, there's a lot you can do about EKKO and FIZZ, especially in the early laning phase, that like you might not necessarily be able to do versus other types of characters. NAAFIRI, on the other hand, is just very simple to play and doesn't really have a lot of outplay potential. TEEMO dash when? No joke. I feel like TEEMO having a small dash on his W wouldn't be the worst thing ever. A lot of people are going to be like, August hates melee top laners. And it's like, dude, I get it. I get playing against VAYNE is not the best time. But I kind of feel like TEEMO is just supposed to be one of the devils of top lane. TEEMO just... I think I'm okay with him being the antagonist of top lane. VAYNE, that's rough. I get it. VAYNE, I'm like, yeah, that's a bad time. But, you know... every lane needs its Satan, you know? Is there a way to prevent VAYNE top? We don't really want to prevent VAYNE top. We want to make sure VAYNE top is balanced. We want to make sure it's not too strong and too omnipresent. But it doesn't really... like, we don't really mind if certain characters go in other lanes at like reasonable power levels and reasonable win rates. And VAYNE is like one of those characters where it's like, yeah, the game looks really bad if she's OP. The game looks really bad if she's really, really popular up there, but we tend to not want to like lock out characters from going to other lanes when they're at reasonable power levels and aren't omnipresent, even if they might have somewhat frustrating patterns. So mainly just getting at like, it is not a goal to delete VAYNE top. A goal would be VAYNE top is not too strong, and VAYNE top is not the thing you're running into all the time, but making sure she can never go there is not really a goal. A while ago, funneling was removed from the game, and Riot said something along those lines of it's not fun to have on your team or play against. In that regard, are the perma split push champs kind of along this line? To some degree. We definitely nerf perma split push champs to some degree, but split pushing is a viable strategy in League that's actually required to exist. Without split pushing, a lot of top laners just cease to function. Like, it's kind of like a pick your poison thing, and I'll explain it like this, okay? Every character has a power budget, right? One of the inbuilt power budgets of many top laners, even if they don't do it all game, is split pushing. And then, of course, there are going to be some split pushers who are, like, you know, more into split pushing. Like, obviously, like, TRYNDAMERE and YORICK do it all the time. But overall, though, split pushing as a concept is part of many top laners' power budgets. Some degree of the time, many top players are going to be up there split pushing because that's how the lane works. And so the question to ask is, okay, let's say we just hyperbolically completely deleted split pushing, right? Like, it was impossible. You couldn't do it. You could only take towers when you were with a team of 5, right? Again, that's not going to happen. Terrible example, but let's use that as a hypothesis, as a as an example. There we go. If we did that, top laners, to be viable champions, now have to be significantly stronger in team fights. And so suddenly it's like, oh, maybe we need old Death Stance back, where they get lifesteal, armor, MR, cooldown reduction. Oh, maybe Aatrox needs his cooldowns significantly shortened. Oh, maybe Briar needs to heal twice as much. She's not a top laner, but imagine she was. Maybe Warwick top needs to heal twice as much as he already does, right? Basically, it's like when you remove the split pushing part of the power budget of top laners, it means that they have to start interacting with enemy teams more. And for a melee champion who likes to solo top to be able to interact with an entire team of enemy champions all the time, it's a lot you have to do to make them work like that. So split pushing is an important part of the game. Comparatively, we felt that, and you know, we're always going to like limit split pushing to some degree. Like we don't want it to be too crazy depending on how it expresses itself. Comparatively, we felt that funnel is not really the same. Funnel ignores part of the game in the way that split pushing doesn't. One of the things we believe pretty strongly in League of Legends is that laning phase is kind of sacred, meaning that like we don't tend to allow characters that win the game by not farming, unless you're a support, right? Like support is different, but like if you win the game very reliably by not caring about killing minions, especially in the laning phase, that tends to be something we move away from. Top Janna, top Sona, mid lane Pyke, mid lane Janna, mid lane Sona, actually. A lot of supports who go to other lanes and don't CS. And funnel is one of these things where the way funnel often expressed itself is one role stopped farming, and then you funnel it into the other role, and then they win. And that had two problems with it. One is, again, one role didn't care about farming anymore, and that was kind of messed up. Like, it's probably incorrect when one of the best players in the game is playing playing TARIC mid and just holding the CS for his jungle Kai'Sa, right? Like, that's, like, pretty messed up in regards to the laning phase. But then also, it also created this really negative thing of, it's kind of a thing where it's like, if you aren't a dangerous strategy to have, unless you think that strategy makes the game better, is a strategy where if you do it and your opponent doesn't, they lose. Like if the strategy could only be beaten by doing it as well, that can be fine if like you like the game to be shaped like that and you think it makes the game better. Like as an example, typically we run 280 carries in the game and both teams need an 80 carry. And a lot of times if you don't have an 80 carry, you're at a disadvantage. But generally we find that strategy to like make sense and make the game better. No comment on the current 3 to 4 80 carry meta. There's maybe some things messed up with 80 carries also mid and top, but anyways, like the general idea of 180 carry each team is like something we like. But like another thing that was like messed up about funnel is there was a thing where the person on the other side, the best way to play against it was to also funnel. If you were trying to play like a normal strategy against a funneling strat, you were in trouble. You were likely to lose because you'd eventually, your two characters who were getting one stream of farm would lose to the one character who got 2 streams of farm, just because of like multiplicative scaling and how that was all working. And so yeah, it was just like this double problematic strategy of it really messed up the laning phase and made a certain characters not care about farming, while also being like fairly unfair to play against in terms of its outcomes. It's like, how do you beat a funneled Yi, a funneled Kai'Sa? And then also, just the general idea of it wasn't, you know, the most enjoyable for anybody to experience, right? Like, the people who felt forced to funnel into their... Like, obviously the Kai'Sa or the Yi was having fun, but the person funneling them wasn't having as much fun, and the enemy team wasn't having a great time. And you could argue... That last one, you could definitely argue about split pushing. It's like, split pushing, it's like, hey, it's not fun to play against it, which I agree, it's a pretty frustrating experience. But at least with split pushing, it's like, there's different degrees of it. We can, like, tune it a bit easier. Not every character is a split pusher in that sense. And then also split pushing, at the very least, also does have a counter, in quotes. And what I mean by that is technically, if TRYNDAMERE is off split pushing, if he's not doing it very well, that gives like an advantage to the team if you manage to take the right 5v5s and get objectives, things like that. Because the other team's gonna be down a player. Now, again, it's rough because if he's doing it right, he'll just be up taking your towers while you're doing all of that. But there are ways to like play around split pushing in a way that like Funnel made it a lot harder to do. So yeah, those are some thoughts.